Welcome to Twilight Garage. David Rogerson here. We're going to be delving into sex, drugs, rock and roll, and all things counterculture here on Twilight Garage each week with my co-host, the great Casey Fields. We're going to be joined by a bevy of experts in each of our subjects. Currently, we're dealing with all things MANSON, and we have the great Deb Silva as a regular expert and contributor. Thank you so much for your subscriptions and your support. We are here for you. We are doing this for free out of the love of the expression of this case and keeping things fair and fun.
The Twilight Garage podcast is brought to you by The Red Onion, the Bay Area's finest hamburgers, located at 11900 San Pablo Avenue in El Chorrito. Tell them Twilight Garage sent you.
Twilighters! Can't thank you enough. Why do we say that every time? Because I fucking mean it. Your life is your time. When you spend your time with us, you're spending your life with us. And I want to place great value on that. And thank you from the bottom of Casey Fields and David Rogerson and Alex Moreno's heart and our respective families. We do this out of love. This is free. One little thing you could do for us, please do subscribe. Like our videos, subscribe. It's a trite, lame thing we have to say, but it's like when a woman is selling her vagina on the street and there's some sort of question involved. Like, hey, babe, you looking for a date tonight? Okay.
Bad Yelp review.
Oh, my word. It's just so redundant, you know? Anyhow, we love you very much, truthfully and verily. That's why this next subject we're treading into, you hear me kind of treading around the edges of this wonderful counterculture show that we bring to you every week. It's evolving. And so far, we've been on the subject of Charles Manson for a few weeks now, and we're going to continue that again. Like I say, I'm dancing around it because it's a pretty somber subject within what is generally regarded as a rather sordid tale. And then one can fall down the rabbit hole and find all these multifaceted characters, and you become in a new time, and it's hard to leave. And one of the characters that really hurts when I read about her, and we pray on her, Casey and I both on a regular. Her name, Dianne Lake, and she became known as what is properly referred to as the family, and her story became more well-known and publicized in recent years with the publication of her book on HarperCollins. And we're going to hear about some of her difficulties later when she comes on Twilight Garage, because we're making our overtures now, and hopefully she's going to like what she sees and be joining us soon. So Casey, with that, again, I dance around. Do you see me over here? Like, I'm so self-assured and cocky and a little maybe full of myself, but this one is hard for me. Again, not to make too many asides and me, the story, as tends to happen on the internet with intrepid journalists on this subject. But some of the things that were very horrifying to this young girl and molded her psyche, I share with her. I had some very terrible things happen to me as a child. And some of these books, whether their accuracy and veracity on the facts involved in this case are anywhere in the neighborhood of being true, some of the elements that are dealt with really are across the gamut in mental health. And I think it was very cathartic for Dianne Lake. I think survivors of incest, of sexual abuse, of all kinds of different horrors, can be made to feel a little more human, a little more part of the fold, not so isolated in their abuse. And with that, I leave the beginning of the story of Dianne Lake with you, because every time I touch on it, man, I just
Yeah, we have a lot of compassion for Dianne, a lot of love for the lady. Dianne was born in 1953 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Her mom was a nurse, and her dad was a Korean War veteran who was a house painter. She was the oldest of three children. And I think when it really started to kind of go off the rails for that poor family is around 1963, when she was 10 years old. Her dad and mom basically separated. Her dad moved to Los Angeles and wanted to really start a career as an artist. He wanted to be done with the house painting and really start to, what would be the word, would you say?
well, spread his wings artistically. He was a very frustrated, typical Midwesterner. His father had been a house painter by trade since before Clarence was born.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes off like a real unpitiable jerk and an uptight liar and an asshole and an untrustworthy man. And it's really a sad thing. And he ruined this little girl's life with his mercurial episodes. And it begs the question, was he bipolar? What were his mental deficiencies? His father was such a creep that he had raped his brother's daughter. Or his own brother's daughter. And it's very troubling when you think about the isolation and the types of abuse that Clarence Lake was availed to as a small child. So then he was trying to work all these things out, and he had these, very bohemian interests. And you got to wonder how horrible these paintings were.
Yeah. I just know that,
Think about the late 50s, early 60s, Midwestern guy trying to fit in. I just think of
what were his influences? What would you say during that time? I mean,
Diebenkorn. Like, I think he was just like the cheesiest West Coast rip-off guy. I just see a lot of gray and shitty post-Picasso garbage, honestly. He had his missing tooth, smoked a shit ton of cigarettes. He was like a 150 a day, 100 cigarette a day kind of guy.
Yeah.
Give me a break, man.
What do you think back in those days? Pall Mall?
Oh, it had to be Reds.
Marlboro Reds.
My stepfather, my first stepfather, smoked the Pall Mall Reds.
Oh, yeah.
And Dianne talked about that quite a bit. And that's a very abusive thing to do to a child, is to put them in close proximity with very, very potent cigarettes in a closed space. And apparently he did that a lot. He would come home and isolate and work on these paintings at night, trying to be this bohemian dude and having these fantasies. He had records he bought from Timothy Leary and these different psychedelic shamans, Allen Ginsberg. So he's listening to basically a hedonistic, overweight, which was hard to do back in those days of that type of food, wild homosexual poet in the form of Allen Ginsberg. So his dad just kind of jumped on whatever merriment made itself available, it seemed. Jazz music. And who's he into? Buddy Rich. Like, get the fuck out of here. It's like just no taste, because they're out in the Midwest, right?
Yeah.
He got what he got. And so I can relate to a lot of that. It's very horrible. It's your life, but it doesn't have a lot of taste to it.
Yeah. So at 10 years old, here's this girl helping to take care of her brothers and sisters, single moms just trying to make it. And then Carol decides that we're going to move the family out to be with dad.
Oh, this whole thing is so bad when you put it up against this whole Midwestern component, because the grandfather, Clarence's father, Mr. Lake Sr., was such an operator as a pedophile that he had the child isolated and brought in to have a little summer vacation at grandma and grandpa's. Well, then what's he do? Send grandma off to do something, right? The second he's got her alone, he's got her undressed in the bathtub.
Wow.
And he's smashing one out. And literally in her book, it's such a disgusting, horrible thing to read. It just breaks your heart. If you have any kind of human sympathy or regard, it is just such a terrible passage to read. Her grandfather's this horrible dude. It was the final rupture between Dianne Lake's father and her grandfather. And this whole thing was no surprise, apparently, to the father, yet somehow went along with this whole peccadillo. And so this child was just destroyed at 9 years of age. Like her whole path, her whole life, her whole psyche was destroyed. And then if trading off their beautiful home they'd bought this home, invested in the community a little bit, dad starts thinking like a goddamn beatnik, right?
Yeah. So they had for a couple years there in the mid 60s, kind of a normal American life. I mean, they lived in a house down,
right up to 63,
down
right?
in Santa Monica. And
no, I'm talking about still in the Midwest.
Okay.
So they pawned off the house for the travel trailer. Dad goes to take off. He's such an unstable dick. He has some shitty car in the winter. Car doesn't run, has a meltdown. So he's in an active psychotic state at that moment. Seriously. The dad is so mentally ill and fucked off. You know, again, not to make it about me. I have been in an active psychotic state for months at a time. So I have a lot of sympathy, and we're going to break down a lot of what happens during these cases in those states, because you can come in and out of these very serious states. And I believe he was in one on the side of the road when they lost it, wound up in a trailer park. All this stuff happens. He gets a patron, purposely burns down the fucking studio the patron sets him up with because he's too stupid to live, right? Can't get out of his own way, starts getting taken care of, needs to have an excuse to run away, right? Oh, no. Been having an affair with whom? His greatest champion in the world, his wife's best friend, Barbara Wajanga. What's he do? Takes the only fucking thing they have, their car, 3 kids, 1 mother, no phone call, no note, no shit, fucking disappears with the car into the snowy night. Deuces with, your best friend. But no, wow. And then reels him the fuck back in after a couple of years. Mom's been dating a little bit. Kids have moved on. Dianne did a thing that I did with my alcoholic, crazy, bipolar mom, which was manage the money and go grocery shopping and basically kind of be like her little hubby. And Dianne went through a lot of that same kind of, it's a very hard load to carry when your trust has been broken. My dad had to leave due to various factors. None of that's made clear to children. So your trust is broken. But as a little girl,
he moved like what, about 15 minutes, 20
yeah,
minutes?
what about still in contact with my dad?
Yeah.
But this dude just to disappear.
Yeah.
A woman is never the same. Little girls' hearts are the strongest, most powerful thing in this universe. And if you misdirect or hurt them, man, let me tell you something. So this guy, real pile. And now, they're back in Santa Monica because the father has reeled the mom in. Barbara dusted him off. You're a fucking loser. What's up with the tooth? Are you really smoking 100 fucking red cigarettes a day? These paintings are awful.
And this is actually one of the few times where Dianne actually had some good memories. like she hanging out at Santa Monica, the beach,
That a
going to the
decent
3rd
house.
Street,
Yeah, had-
promenade, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever been there before?
Well, 3rd Street Promenade
Dude,
was
that place
nuts
is wild,
back then.
bro.
Now it's pretty, it's pretty genteel, but
Dude,
back then,
2002. Check this out, homeboy. Okay, 2002. I'm down in LA, hanging out 3rd Street Promenade. It's an outdoor area of shops, and all of a sudden,
Esplanade, if
this
you will.
dude starts levitating off of the ground. Legs crossed, hands up. People are just tripping out. It wasn't one of these deals like these guys that you see that have a cane that's rigged up, it wasn't an illusion. Next thing you know, some guy with mental illness grabs a garbage can and throws it underneath the guy, and he goes bouncing under. And guy's still up there in the air. A few minutes later, drops down. It wasn't like some nice genie like coming down. Guy just fell.
Like maybe it
was
be.
Wild, bro. That place is nuts.
It's a convergence of energy. That whole boardwalk, that whole scene down there, and that's what people don't understand. Like when Lynn hooked up with Charlie, the gardener, initially down there, there's a certain magic in the place. So they're down there in that area that has been really exciting since the whole post-war period, early 50s beatniks, real eccentrics, winos, real exciting people coming out of there.
And mom and dad, that's when they really started to experiment, right, with psychedelics.
Well,
and stuff.
Mom got some weed from the neighbor.
Yeah.
Mom got toked up with the neighbor, and that was it. And Dianne says, oh man, Dianne Lake, spokesperson for DARE, to keep
14 years old. She's doing LSD, and
dude, she's 12 years old over here, homeboy.
Yeah.
Roasting him with papa. Mom gets high one time. Dad likes trying to get high. He's like, damn it, I've been wanting to get high for years. And so can't pull it off. Mom gets high. Dad's all chasing the dragon. Finally gets loaded. That's it. But she says, hey man, it wasn't like, a gradual change. It was night and day. Like, just forget it. They were at the
they dropped out
for sure.
Hardcore.
Became people who were involved with the Oracle magazine, which was a big hippie thing. I remember that when I was a little kid in the LA area.
Yep. Published out of the Laurel Canyon Tavern, right there in Laurel Canyon, where Charles Winans lived. Now she also, I believe, said that they did a little bit of traveling in this camper. I believe that they actually went up to the Esalen Institute for a little while. And eventually mom and dad found the hog farm, which was Hugh Romney's place, aka Wavy Gravy.
And he still looks about the same. Past few years, he's become a bit more aged, but we'd see him out at dinner pretty regularly.
Right in Berkeley, right?
Yes, we'd see him in Albany.
Yeah.
And there's a place we'd regularly eat at, and he'd just go by and he'd shake your hand. He'd know that you knew who he was, and he would just give you one of those. And real nice guy. His wife was super tolerant. And he is very much about the whole idea of being Wavy Gravy, holding his place within counterculture royalty, if you will. And I don't know, it's a bit much now in retrospect. And I think the way that Diane's life was permanently harmed as a result of the high-handedness of her obsessed, self-centered, shitty parents and Hugh Romney.
So flipping over to Charlie and the girls at this time, this is towards the end of 1967. They had been staying in Santa Barbara and Lower Topanga Canyon in the area known as the Snake Pit. What happened was Charlie and the girls went to check out the hog farm. They wanted to see what Wavy Gravy was doing out there. And some people speculate and say that he wanted to like take it over, that he thought maybe he could like lead the hog farm, or I don't know about that, but apparently what had happened is that Dianne, through doing psychedelics, decided that she's going to move on, and she went up to San Francisco. She traveled a little bit, hitchhiking, met people. And during this period when Charlie and the girls went to go out to Tahunga, to the hog farm, Dianne was not there. So they became friends with Dianne's parents. I guess they went on a little vacation to Mojave together. And during their time, Manson was saying, we're going up to San Francisco. And Dianne's mom, Carol, said, here's a picture of Dianne. When you're up there, keep your eye out for her.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. That's why when it's funny, if you younger people watch these old detective shows and they'll pull out like a crinkled up photograph. Have you seen this girl? That used to actually happen. And if you think about what a small world and what a humble yet huge request that is, and then to give up a photograph of your loved one to send out message in the bottle style, it's pretty incredible.
There was a whole board in the Haight-Ashbury full of thousands of kids' pictures, right?
Message asking, boards.
Yeah, Johnny, if you see this, call home. You know,
for sure.
Parents looking for there was over 200,000 youth that were living in the Haight-Ashbury in the Summer of Love, all of which came from all over the country.
What did we say that was? About a 250 square block area in San Francisco. Some of that encompassing the Panhandle, which is part of Golden Gate Park itself. So there's some outdoor camping, but that was an incredible load on the city, an incredible impact on the culture of the city. Mm-hmm. And it endured for many years, even into the AIDS crisis, because a lot of the hippies that came were gay or had different things going on in their lives and became stalwarts of the city, became very successful, were from some of the better families across the country. And then they had resettled here and had a great impact on theater and the musical
absolutely
landscape of San Francisco, including the symphonic scene, including
the artwork, everything, music.
That's why when we had that huge crisis and a major culling of the gay community in the AIDS crisis, it really impacted a lot of that. And that's why I think we're seeing how terrible San Francisco can be, what can happen to a city with the lack of patronage and active, caring citizens with enough resources to change their environment. But back then, we had Dianne. I just felt it terrible that her parents and these other people around, once they did find her and return back with her.
Yeah, because Charlie and the girls didn't actually find her in the Haight. They returned to LA, and around right just after Thanksgiving 1967, Dianne went back to LA, returned to her parents at the hog farm, and I believe she stayed for like a month, right?
And got a pretty harsh rep because at 14 she was very sexually active and was really out there getting after it. And that's the whole thing. As a father, I don't care what you're doing. You're not getting high. You're not out here doing all these promiscuous things as a child. I don't care what the mores and the standards of the day are. You know, my heart is made that way. And when I see men comport themselves and allow their women to be exploited and taken advantage of and hurt, and they lead with the girls. He just left 3 girls and a little boy in the fucking Midwest in the middle of winter without a word, liquor, and a promise. Just gets them back. And then again is on the fucking road with their in a bread truck at that point. The ever popular bread truck. We had one of those as well. They were very popular. Some of them were pretty good size. They're mainly just, we called them step vans because they evolved from the shorter base urban bread trucks to the larger variety.
So Dianne has been pretty open in talking about it. Wavy Gravy sat her down along with his wife, and they said, "Hey, you know what? You're basically too much of a liability. You're sexually active as a young teenager, and we can't have you here." And so there was a friend of hers. There was a couple in their 20s. They have different names. Some places you see them called Ronald and Linda. Other times she refers to them as Richard and Allegra. But she went she went out and lived with this couple first in Zuma Beach, I believe, and then eventually they found their way to the Lower Topanga Canyon, and they moved in to what we know infamously know as the Snake Pit and the Spiral Staircase House.
Correct.
Now, a lady named Gina Marlowe, which often has been mistaken for Georgina Brayton, leader of the OTO. This is not the same lady. Ginger Marlowe was a woman that is actually still alive. Nick is trying to actually sit down with her to interview her. She is in the Santa Barbara area, and it would just be really neat to hear her tell these stories of her arrangement that she later had with Manson. But anyways, Dianne and this young couple agreed to fix up the Spiral Staircase house because for years there had been a den for like heroin addicts and Satan worshipers, and just they tore the place up.
What?
You know?
Nick was over there? No, whoa, sorry. He's a former prominent Satanist. My bad.
So they cleaned it up, and after a little while, next thing you know, like Dianne starts sleeping with the guy, right? Her friend's husband or fiance, whatever he was. And here she is. She's 14 years old.
That's pretty hard to keep hands off a
yeah.
14-year-old freewheeling girl. Like, good Lord, these guys and the way they comported themselves. Like, man, I would just stove a dude's head in. You're a 14-year-old girl? Man, I'm going to have to stomp your face in, bro. Sorry.
So after, all this horrible stuff with her parents and this instability in her life, she said, I was abused, I was neglected, and I was abandoned. So,
and that is not an exaggeration. And that's her letting a lot of people off the hook, man. It was all bad for Ms. Lake.
So this older couple that she lived with,
man,
and when I say older, they literally were like in their 20s. They said, we want you to meet this groovy guy. So they took her to a place where Charles Manson was living right there in Topanga. And first person she met was Lynn. And Lynn said, Dianne is here, telling her you're even more beautiful than your picture, which is kind of sweet. So instantly she just felt like she had been absorbed into this family. I mean, it was really the family that she was hoping for. Well, you
think about it, there's the coincidence factor that, does she know that they've seen a photograph of her or maybe even have the photograph, right? So you're 14, probably pretty high. You're hanging out with these older people you've been fucking, right? And then you show up and these people are like, hey, oh my God, Dianne is here. And Lynn's got that voice. Lynn is super welcoming. If it's in Lynn's heart to be glad to see you, it's going to come across in a very genuine way. It's a very exciting thing to behold. So then here she comes, right? Across the room, boop, boop, boop. So immediately feels it. And then that's what, in reflections, made me, again, look at Susan differently and look at Dianne differently, because her sympathy, Lynn Frommy's sympathy, and just insight to their needs as young girls, and her level of forgiveness as a result is making me try to have that in my own life more. Because if you can forgive somebody for basically taking your entire life and folding it up, and then the rest of Lynn's life after Susan testified, right? or ran her mouth in Sybil Brand, which however you want to term it. It was just, right? And then for her to have that level of forgiveness, and then for her to try to help Snake later, which we'll talk about. But so now there's this convergence. She's met Charlie.
And she said one of the first things Charlie said to her was, "So this is our Diane."
Right.
Yeah.
So how does she know that there's been this buildup? Because it's been weeks, right? Like, hey, is that her? Bunch of runaways. She's got kind of red hair, freckles. I hear she's got kind of a big Bertha butt. You know what I mean? Squinty eyes, maybe, because they gave her a hard time about that in school, right? So that's how you would describe somebody, like some bubble butt little girl, right? And so they're looking all over, and so they've been on the mind, and then she just pops up. They've been looking for her in San Francisco, and she just pops up where they're staying. So must have been exciting all the way around, like, oh, because things like that would happen at that period in time. You would show up and people would be excited. Hey, they made it, because your car actually functioned to the point that you arrived at the event. Like, wait, what? Like, that was a cause for celebration. Like, we didn't have to come get you on the side of the road, And so for her to just dead ass in their laps, literally. So that's the thing. I think that it's a sentence in a book. And after this woman had been raped by her grandfather, had all these terrible things happen throughout her life. Okay. And then to feel this love from this intense group of really cool people. And when I was younger, in the 70s, when I saw a group of long-haired, cool people with their Levi's and all the embroidery and the whole shit going on, that was it, man.
Yeah.
Coke and a smile. That's all you need.
And also right away, they invited her to roll with them. She said they were on their way to Florida. I believe that they made it as far as Texas.
Yeah, that's right.
And then they turned around, and on their way coming back, the bus broke down in some college town in New Mexico. And this Charlie was experiencing just this horrible toothache at the time.
Right.
We hear this story about her asking him how, saying something to him, and him cracking her across the jaw real quick, chin checking her. But I heard that Charlie actually hitchhiked back home and left them under the care of Susan Atkins.
Yes.
Make sure to get all these girls back.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so Mary and Susan and Diane, a couple others, they were in the process of trying to get this bus fixed. I don't know what kind of negotiations they had to do with the local mechanic. I mean, what money that they had.
There's some local lore in Ridgecrest about that, which I hope to clear up, because it can't all be true.
Yeah.
It's
and then
fun.
Next thing you know, like Susan Atkins says, fuck it. She takes off just like Charlie did. So now it's Mary's problem, to get these girls in the bus home. So all of a sudden, Charlie's back in Topanga. Susan comes rolling up by herself. He's pissed off. Why'd you leave them there? And then a few days later, Diane and the rest of them showed up. So
yet another example of what we talked about last episode with Susan Atkins was her level of competitiveness and mimicry of Charles Manson, and her degree that she seemed to really want to be Charlie herself. And there was that whole thing that people used to say, I became Charlie, or Charlie had eaten me all up, or I'd eaten Charlie up. I'm just really absorbing one another.
So that wraps up 66, 67. We're going to move on to the next episode, but we're going to address 68, 69, and a little bit of her life after the family. But again, Twilighters, we want to thank you for showing up, and please hit that like button. Tell your friends.
And remember, this is a community based on love. We're really trying to have a nice time here with one another and respect each other. There's a lot of information that has been in existence for a long time that is not available to the casual observer now because technology has changed. A lot of people have moved on from the subject, even though I hope they can make some of their files available to us. And maybe, just maybe, if we give them some love and kindness, we can bring some people back out of the shadows who thought better of using their time in a more meaningful way. And they will share some of this information with us because Twilighters, I'm getting a lot of really, really nice feedback and press.
Thank you.
About how deep we're touching on this case. We're just getting into it. And let me, for myself, say, I'm humbly very neutral beginner in this case. I want to know more. Ultimately, all of my true information goes back to Deb Silva. My heart is with Lynn Fromme, and I'm so glad to be here. But that's where we're at with this thing. We can't thank you enough for coming along. And look at these subscribers. I'm so excited. It's like Christmas. I'm sure like veteran YouTubers are like laughing at me, but every single time, bing, bing, you guys, seriously. I meant, well, you know, we're real cool here at Twilight. And, you know, of course you're subscribing because, you know, we're just the coolest and we love having you. Thank you, Twilighters, again, for all of your love, support, and especially those subscriptions. Subscriptions. Man, what they do to me, babe.